everybody, it's vaccine time in America. Washington's getting shots. Texas, shots. Illinois, shot. Everybody!
Except for Oregon. They've got nothing. Anyway, there's still a big ethical discussion as to who gets the vaccine next. And, wait a minute. Hold on. No shots in Oregon at all yet? Even Canada's getting shots. Missouri, New York. In Oklahoma, they have drive-through vaccinations. Drive-through! And even though the vaccines landed in PDX more than 24 hours ago, we've still got nothing. And you know what? At this point, we shouldn't be that surprised we're this far behind other states, because that's been kind of the theme this year. Here's the story.
And I'm Dan Haggerty. Hi, welcome to The Story. Good to be back. Maggie, as usual, knocked it out of the park, filling in for me yesterday. And once again, answered the age-old question, do we really even need Dan? We do. We spent a fortune on letterhead, so that's kind of locked in for a bit. Lots to talk about, lots of vaccine stuff to talk about, lots of Red House to talk about, of course, lots of your questions to answer. So please keep sending them our way. You can see all the contact information right down there at the bottom of your screen. Use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter or Instagram. Email the story at kgw.com or message me on Facebook. Now, our viewers in Washington probably going to be thrilled to hear these words come out of my mouth at the top of the show. We are going to start tonight north of the Columbia. We didn't edit in those cheers. That really happened. And I think that they are warranted, because those are the very first rounds of the coronavirus vaccine being given out in Washington. This is the University of Washington Medical Center. The school got about 4,000 doses yesterday. And you'll remember yesterday also Oregon getting the very first batch of our vaccine landing here at PDX in a FedEx plane, no less. 975 doses of Pfizer's historic vaccine, manufactured in less than a year, a record-setting pace to create a vaccine for a novel virus like the one we're dealing with right now. And I would love to be showing you some video of cheering for Oregon medical workers who are getting their very first shots here in our state, except it hasn't happened yet. And you saw at the top of the show, all right, what we're talking about. It's happening basically everywhere. Illinois, New York, Texas, Oklahoma, other countries. Oregonians, though, waiting even longer right now. Now, if you are an Oregonian, kind of is easy to feel that we are always a little bit behind the eight ball in this coronavirus fight. Sure, we have had our fair share of success. That should be said right off the top. Oregonians have great mask-wearing habits. That is true. And we have relatively lower numbers of cases and deaths compared to a lot of other states. But in terms of testing, in terms of contact tracing, and now in terms of starting this vaccine for the virus, we are behind yet again. Just look at some of these headlines from November 15th, for instance, in the Oregonian. Oregon fails to test enough residents for coronavirus as need hits all-time high. Or another one from June. This is the Willamette Week. New Johns Hopkins University data shows Oregon's COVID-19 testing lags behind all but one state. That other state was Idaho, by the way. Then in November, we reported Washington was unveiling this contact tracing app that was supposed to help everybody, something numerous states have debuted to track this virus. Oregon, ours probably won't be ready until about January. And now we get to sit back and watch almost every other state start to inoculate their heroic healthcare workers while ours wait at least another day. And that's going to bring us to our big story tonight. What is the holdup exactly? Why is Oregon behind again? Pat Doris has been spending the day trying to answer that question, so I asked him about it earlier.
Let's talk a little bit about when this vaccine is going to start being administered here in Oregon. We're seeing it happen in other states. We're still waiting here. What is the reason for the delay in Oregon?
Well, I think it gets down to the comfort level of the doctors and the administrators involved. Each hospital got the vaccine from the federal government. They're in charge of when they're going to dole it out to their employees and eventually to their community. So at Legacy, for example, they were saying, look, we want to take a couple of days and really study this thoroughly because we do not want to make a mistake in the effort to rush to be the first one. So they'd rather be safe than first.
And just to be clear to everybody, this isn't a state decision or mandate to kind of wait until Wednesday. These were the hospitals making these decisions?
That's right. They could go as soon as they were comfortable. And I think it just worked out that Wednesday is going to be the day.
So what's going to happen tomorrow?
Well, there's 3 hospital systems that are all sort of now coordinating with the governor's office and the OHA to give their first injections. There's going to be a media event that starts at 11 o'clock. It'll involve St. Alphonsus over in Eastern Oregon, and it'll involve a couple of the big hospitals locally as well, OHSU and another one. But we'll see it all, and it should play out, and it should be pretty dramatic. These will be the first Oregonians to be getting shots in this thing.
And we know a lot of the people who are kind of first in line are those folks who have been working in the hospitals, working with COVID patients, those first responders. But when it comes to the second round, wave 2, people like essential workers and things like that, what do we know about the details of those folks? Who's going to be first in line when it comes to, I guess, seating Group B?
Well, it's very non-transparent. The governor's office says, and the OHA, well, we're going to put together a panel and we'll decide sometime in the future. I mean, this thing has been coming for almost 10 months now. You'd think they'd have it, but they don't. So it's going to include all kinds of people, teachers, prisoners, the essential workers, who's not essential. It becomes kind of a sticky wicket. So I'm sure they're not excited to dive into that. And there's this whole equity piece too, because the Black and brown population unfairly and are getting a lot more pain from this whole pandemic. More people are dying in those communities. So they want to make sure that those folks are moved up in line as well to protect them, because there are a lot of frontline workers. So there's going to be a panel, there's going to be a decision, but there hasn't been yet. And they could have started this, it seems like, 3 months ago.
And when again?
They're waiting.
When again is this panel going to start making that decision? Do we know?
I think they're going to start meeting in January.
Oh,
so
okay.
We're going to keep their feet to the fire and say, come on, guys, let's go.
I know you will. Pat Doris, thank you.
You bet.
So we've established that we're not giving shots yet, right? Not until tomorrow. As for who is next on the list after this first group to get vaccinated, we don't know that either, as Pat was saying, but hopefully those officials are going to have some more information for us next month. Now, to be clear, Oregon's not alone on this one. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, dozens of states are still drawing up plans, really, for the full vaccine rollout. So after this first group, who comes next? And as part of that, each state will have to make a lot of tough ethical calls, like who to inoculate first, young adults, maybe the people spreading the virus at the highest rate, or older people who are more likely to get really sick and die from it. Maggie Vespa looked into this for us.
From the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, age has played a role. Early on, experts thought kids and young adults weren't really at risk for serious complications. We soon learned that's not true. While the young and healthy are less likely to get seriously ill or die, the coronavirus spares no age bracket as a whole. Now, after a harrowing year, we have light at the end of the tunnel. And Oregon officials say they're in the midst of building their full vaccine plan due out next month. For now, they'll start largely by inoculating healthcare workers. The question, who's next in line? One factor they'll have to weigh is familiar: age. OHA stats released this week show Oregonians in their 20s, 30s, and 40s make up for more than half, 54%, of confirmed infections in Oregon. Those over the age of 65 make up just 17%. But, of course, people in that second group are more likely to get seriously ill or die from COVID. So, who's the priority? Staff at the OHA were blunt. They're too busy building the vaccine plan to discuss the ethics of it on camera.
I do not envy OHA their job. I would not want that job. So I'm glad I don't have to make this decision.
So we turned to a medical ethics expert from Portland State University.
There are so many different things to weigh and balance.
Assistant Professor Brian Swick.
Can we just walk through, like I said, for people who are getting acquainted with this question or dilemma, so to speak, like what are just the basic arguments for each? Like how would you explain why this is something that they have to weigh?
Well, first, whenever you're crafting a vaccination strategy in a situation like this, there's a number of different considerations and demands and goals. So you do have what we could just call public health goals, which are things like reducing the total amount, the aggregate amount of mortality and morbidity or sickness and death, in other words. But then you have other sorts of considerations and demands.
Swick points out there are reasons to prioritize vaccinating people who aren't the most at risk for COVID.
So, for example, let's just take a particularly big one, opening schools, right? I mean, school teachers tend to be much younger, although that's, nuanced, depends on the location or something like that. But an opening schools is not a small goal. I mean, especially elementary schools, this is a big deal to have so many kids of that age learning remotely. This has been well discussed. I mean, remote learning doesn't work for everybody.
He added, while some may see high transmission rates among young people as a sign they're behaving recklessly, that's not necessarily the case.
Many people are out and about because they have caregiver responsibilities, because they have to continue working, including in occupations that are public facing, and so there's a high risk of transmission. There's a variety of reasons why somebody might not just sit at home watching Netflix, and so put themselves in a situation where they're at risk for the virus.
All that said, amid this pandemic, there is a big curveball. Scientists right now say data shows these vaccines will prevent you from getting sick from COVID, but they don't know whether they will prevent you from being a carrier and passing the virus on to other people. That, Swick points out, could bolster the argument for vaccinating older, more vulnerable people first, since simply vaccinating everyone around them may not give them any protection. All that said, no matter what officials do, some people will be prioritized, others deprioritized, and emotions will run high. So, as someone who, in his own words, is
pretty far down the list,
Swick just hopes people remember, eventually, everyone's turn will come.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of discussion and a lot of hand-wringing and a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking about the whole process. But in the end, this is the beginning of the end of the pandemic. It may take some more time. Certainly we'll lose more people along the way. This is a tragedy that should never be, minimized, but the end game is here. This is the beginning of the end. And within less than a year, things that we care about, that we miss very much, are going to come back into our lives now because of this vaccine.
Maggie Vespa, KGW News.
Now, every time there's a huge advancement in the coronavirus story, we get a ton of questions. This vaccine news is no different. A lot of you have been reaching out, wanting to know how this is going to work, what we're dealing with moving forward. Kristen Severance is our go-to person to get these questions answered. Kristen, what do you have for us tonight?
Okay, so our first question is something so many people want to know. How will I know when it's my turn to get the vaccine? We reached out to the Oregon Health Authority for this answer. A spokesman said it's going to be a while, probably spring, until the general population gets the vaccine. But when that time comes, vaccine providers, including pharmacies, doctors' offices, clinics, etc., will be giving out the vaccine. The OHA said those providers will notify the public when the vaccine is available by posting that information online, and then you have to reach out to your provider to then get the vaccine.
One thing people want to know the specifics of this, and one thing we keep getting asked a lot, what's the difference between the first and second dose of this vaccine? Are they the same?
Yeah, so this answer actually surprised me. Yes, they are. They're the same. The contents of the first and second doses of each vaccine are the same, but they function differently in the body. So the first dose is supposed to train the immune system, and the second dose will boost the immune system to its highest peak levels to give you the most durable immunity. All right, so our next question, can you just get one dose if the supplies run out? So this is a two-part answer. So yes, you can, but doctors and health officials say you really should not do that, because in order for the vaccine to be about 95% effective, patients need to take 2 doses. For Pfizer, according to the FDA, the vaccine does offer strong protection, about 53% efficacy against COVID-19 within about 10 days after the first dose. But it's unclear how long this protection will last, underscoring the importance of getting the second dose that brings the efficacy rate to that near 95% after 7 days. The OHA has told us it will make sure that everyone who gets a first dose gets a second dose, and they are confident that they will receive more allocations from the federal government.
I have a question. Now, I've seen this a couple of times too, so I don't feel embarrassed asking it. And it's about the really, really cold temperature that at least one of these vaccines has to be stored at, that 70 degrees Celsius. Will the vaccine remain in that cold of a temperature when it's injected into your arm?
I mean, I heard you laugh a little bit there. We've gotten this question so many times. No, it will not. And I don't blame people for asking this, because we kept talking about the ultra cold storage. So the vaccine will be thawed to a liquid form of around 36 to 46 degrees Fahrenheit before it's injected. It will be the same temperature as any other vaccine by the time it's put into the syringe. And that's according to an expert at the Oregon Health and Science University, Mark Slifka. All right, 2 more questions. Great questions. Number 1, are flu rates down this year? In Oregon and across the country, flu cases are extremely low this year. So in mid-December of last year, of 2019, we were already seeing several hundred positive tests each week compared to a handful a week this year. The OHA told us that we were having 20 to 30 hospitalized cases a week this time last year. We have not had any hospitalized flu cases in the metro area, which is very unusual usual. The CDC says it's because the measures we have taken to fight COVID-19 are also working to fight the flu. And then this last question, well, it's more of a statement from a story viewer. She says, please start adding that the vaccine benefited from the preliminary work that came from developments for a MERS vaccine and another coronavirus. And this Mary, that's the viewer who wrote this, said that it's one reason to help us understand, why this happened so fast. And she's right. One of the biggest misconceptions about COVID-19, about the vaccine, is that its development started with the pandemic. In reality, scientists had a head start because COVID-19 comes from a family of viruses, including the SARS coronavirus of 2002 and the MERS coronavirus of 2012. Many of the researchers who are developing the COVID-19 vaccines have previously worked on vaccines for the SARS and the MERS viruses, so they already knew about a lot about what worked and what didn't. And scientists already knew how this family of viruses behaves, their biology, and the so-called spike protein, which allows the virus to enter our cells and infect us. So a lot of the groundwork, Dan, was already laid, before COVID-19 became a thing.
You kind of sound like you're pre-med at this point with all the work you've been doing, kind of researching this virus. Do you want to tell people a little bit about how you're able to answer these questions night after night?
Luckily, we work with a ton of smart people. We have this whole vaccine team here at KGW, and we also reach out to so many sources and doctors and scientists and health experts. So that's how we are able to really answer all these questions. So please keep them coming. All you have to do is use,
It's got to be on there somewhere.
All you have to do is use everyone's favorite hashtag. Hey, Dan.
Hey, we got to it. Thanks, Kristen. Now, when the story continues, if the Red House protests started because one family got evicted, imagine what could happen if tens of thousands are evicted next year. A housing advocacy group thinks that that's actually possible. But the governor says, why don't we go ahead and try and fix that in a one-day special session?
This will be our third special session. Never thought I'd see that.
All right, welcome back to the story. Thanks to everybody writing in, sending us questions and comments, things like that. We really that really is the heart and soul of this show that we do every single night. So please keep sending those. We'll keep answering them. Pick up the phone, tweet us using the hashtag HeyDan. Follow us on Instagram, The Story KGW, or email thestory@kgw.com. Now, last week I had some thoughts about the situation at the Red House on North Mississippi, and we're going to get into some reaction in just a minute. But first, I wanted to read a very simple question from a viewer named Gloria Nelson. She asked, what's really going on here? And that is a fair question at this point, Gloria. It's safe to say that we all know a whole lot more about this Red House today than we did a few days ago or a week ago. But for the rest of us, people who are kind of still getting caught up to speed, how did we get here?
Signs are pointing toward a peaceful resolution at the Red House. Cars are rolling through North Mississippi again. And the developer who owns the home says he's waiting to hear an offer from the family at the center of this Red House occupation. But, how did we get here? For the purposes of this story, let's say things began in 2002. That's when the longtime owner of the Red House, William Kinney Jr., took out a loan on the place to help pay for his son's legal fees. His son, William Kinney III, had hit and killed a man while driving on a suspended license. But in 2016, there were complications with the loan, and the family defaulted. Then in 2018, the house was put into foreclosure auction and bought by a developer. Fast forward to this summer when the city evicted the Kinneys from the Red House. Protesters started camping out there in September and calling on the eviction to be reversed. But then last week, everything just seemed to escalate. On Tuesday, December 8th, the Portland Police and Multnomah County Sheriff's deputies showed up early in the morning to re-secure the house. Mayor Wheeler said he authorized police to, quote, use all lawful means to end the illegal occupation. That led to a skirmish between officers and protesters, but the occupation continued for the rest of last week. On December 9th, there were reports of homemade spike strips placed on the streets and armed guards posted at intersections. On the 10th, OPB reported that the occupiers tried to forbid members of the media from taking pictures of people, even assaulting a female reporter. But right as things seemed teed up to explode, that same day, the developer who bought the house said he was willing to sell it back to the Kinneys at cost to prevent more tension. And on Sunday, the city and the Kinneys appeared to reach a tentative deal, and the barricades came down. And that's roughly how we got here.
Yeah, believe it or not, that's the simple version of the story. This is only a half-hour show, okay? It doesn't really get into the fact even that we learned that the Kinneys own a second house about 2 miles away with a market value of $200,000, and that the whole time the community was raising $300,000 just to help them buy back that red house in the first place. We also get into the context behind these protests, such as Portland's racist history of redlining, forcing black families to live in a tiny slice of North Portland. Or the fact that these neighborhoods are now gentrifying at a rapid rate and rent prices are getting jacked up and doing so very quickly. Or that BIPOC families like the Kinneys are often targeted with predatory loans. We also didn't get into the Kinneys' legal arguments through all of this, insisting that he is a sovereign citizen and not actually bound by United States law, something that has never worked in these types of situations. What I'm trying to say is, if you don't already know, the story is complicated, to say it simply, but I hope that you now have at least a better understanding of where we are at this point. That said, the details about this specific story can cloud the bigger picture and the legitimate problems that tens of thousands of families are facing right now. When we hear figures like this one, for instance, across Oregon, the housing advocate group Stable Homes for Oregon Families, they estimate between 20,000 and 40,000 Oregon households will be at risk of eviction if Oregon doesn't take action, and the eviction moratorium expires at the end of the year. So, today, Governor Brown announced that she's going to hold a special legislative session next Monday to pass some relief in the form of $800 million. It's a one-day only affair. That's the plan. The governor hopes that leaders can agree and pass something and call it a day, in and out. Considering, though, that our last two official sessions ended in a walkout, if you're feeling skeptical right now that they can do that, it's warranted. But look, this special scenario, some leaders might be more willing to put aside partisan differences, we hope. The governor proposed $800 million in relief aimed at tenants and landlords, funding vaccine distribution and contact tracing, wildfire prevention and community preparedness, and support for reopening Oregon schools. All important things. Today, Oregon Senate President Peter Courtney talked about the plan.
This will be our third special session. Never thought I'd see that. And so as we get ready for this, we are going to go in under the restraints that we have put in place for the last two special sessions. Mask wearing, only going into certain rooms with elevators, restrooms with only two people at best, staying in your offices to minimize our ability to function in the way that we need to function and have to function, but at the same time trying to be as safe as we can.
Senator Courtney hopes relief can be passed in this one big bill. Restaurant and bar owners are hoping that that big bill will allow them to finally start selling alcohol to go. We've talked about that a few times here on the show, and it's something that Washington allows, but Oregon does not. Speaking of Oregon being kind of behind the eight ball, for what it's worth, Senator Courtney thinks that that bill will pass, in which case OLCC will have 3 days to change the rules. 30 days to change the rules. So we'll see what happens. The special session will be December 21st, starting at 8 a.m. Of course, we'll cover it for you. Now, before we go riding off into the sunset tonight, we're going to read a viewer question about a charming piece of Portland history you can still find downtown. So hold your horses. We're going to finish the story next. All right, Kelly Harris asks, does the KGW Vault have anything about Portland's historic sidewalk horse rings? Hashtag keep Portland weird. So full disclosure, Kelly, we actually, we have to check. But consider this our word that tomorrow we're going to dig around in the vault and look for more information on Portland's sidewalk horse rings. But like this one from this picture from a viewer, Kelly Nolot, these were installed in the early 20th century for people to hitch their horses downtown. They're pretty cool. When you spot them, once you've noticed one, you keep noticing a lot of them. People apparently still use them. So we'd like to see if you have any creative ways that you've seen people using the horse rings out there. Send them to us. Use that hashtag HeyDan or email us at thestory@kgw.com. A couple of things, a couple quick comments. Somebody wrote in and said, hey, I thought the Kinney second home was worth $600,000. You said $200,000. I misspoke. It even said $600,000 in the prompter. I just said $200,000 because that's how my brain works. It is $600,000. I said that incorrectly. So somebody wrote in, watcher for now, said, if I get the Pfizer vaccine for number 1, can I get the Moderna for number 2? No. Stick with the same brand. These things are Coke and Pepsi. They both have the same goals, but they work differently, okay? So if you get the Pfizer for one, you got to get Pfizer for two, and that's true for the other one as well. And lastly, we keep getting emails about this light that's out over here. We know. We're on it. We're working on it. You know, apparently shipping companies are really behind this time of year. I can't figure out why, but as soon as we get the light bulb, we'll light it up behind us. That's it for the night. That's the story. See you back here tomorrow.